We got the 2000 Cadillac DT. I said DTS. It's a 2000 Cadillac DeVille 4.6 engine. It went up. The temperature is the problem with this car. This has 130,000 miles on it. The temperature bar went up about 2 more bars. So close to where that edge is right there is where it ended. So on the scan data, it wound up showing about 247 degrees or so. Complaint about this car was when the AC's on, when the AC's on, the car would overheat. Let me show you, before I go into detail, what can cause this. We all know that the engine is infamously known for failing head gasket wise because of the stripped threads for the head gasket bolts. But let me show you some PID data, and then I'll go over some scenarios of what could happen and what I'm concluding that needs to happen before I start repairing anything. But it's not going to get too terribly hot, but it's already hit 250 a couple times. So anyway, so from scan data, I'm in the generic portion. This is the Altel MK908. Those who want to know, like 650 RPM. The vehicle has been running for about 30 minutes. I've taken it on a nice test drive to replicate the symptoms, and it hit up to about 247. Currently it's at 239. One other thing this car is definitely going to need is a upper radiator hose. This is swelling, it's very soft, and it's very hot. So I do have the plastic cover off, and I do have access to the lower radiator hose. This hose is obviously hot. I can't keep my hands on it, but if I put my hand down here on the lower radiator hose, I can keep my hands on it. So those temperatures aren't matching, which indicate that there's a thermostat problem. And why I'm saying it's a thermostat and not like a head gasket problem, well, the car doesn't immediately overheats. It takes a while for everything to heat soak, and you have to drive it and of course leave the AC on. And if you know about air conditioning, this is a condenser. This condenser gets really hot. That's why the fans stay on, to be able to keep that condenser cold so the AC will stay cold. That's why when you drive on the highway, the AC is cold, and even cooler when it's raining outside. So as long as this condenser's cold, you're gonna have cold AC because it's a heat transfer. It's the radiator of the AC system. So what happens in regards to this vehicle overheating is pulling not just the heat from the engine compartment, but also heat from the external portion of the radiator. So the ambient air temperature is already 100 degrees out here. Now this right here is probably gonna be 150 degrees itself. And so you can imagine it's putting in double hot air, and it can't cool the radiator efficiently. On top of that, the thermostat isn't opening up properly. So why I'm concluding the thermostat is defective is simply because, again, that bottom hose isn't the same temperature as that top radiator hose, which indicate that thermostat isn't opening up. The fans are on, it's cooling. The radiator stand is nice and saturated with cool air. Now, cool in respect to a normal working cooling system. So I'm not going to conclude that the radiator is defective. One thing you can do is pour water on the radiator, since it's very accessible. See if it cools. If it do cool down, you might have a radiator problem. But in this case, I poured water on the radiator, and it was to no avail. Make sure your fans are working. The fans are working strong. And make sure, obviously, you don't have a blown head gasket. There's no misfires, no coolant mixing with the oil or vice versa. One other thing I'm going to check, I'm going to relieve some of that pressure off the cooling system, pull that cap off, start up with it already hot, and see if it starts pushing out, which is an indication that there's some head gasket problems. In this case, it's not going to be any. I just only know for a fact it needs a thermostat. But I'm going to pull it off anyway because I'm usually wrong. Let's see what happens. This is very dangerous. This is why you should never emulate me, because I'm liable to get scalding third-degree burns if I screw this up. This is only boiling right now because it's literally 250 degrees. That's very hot. That's beyond the boiling point of water. I think boiling point of water is like 170 degrees or something. Don't quote me on that. Oh gosh, that's strong. All right, let me start it up and see what happens. All right, it's not pushing out or anything. So, yeah, I just say the thermostat's bad. That's all I need to put on here. So I called the parts store, got a quote for the thermostat gasket, thermostat and gasket, and upper radiator hose. So labor time to replace the thermostat is 1.4 hours. That's not including the upper radiator hose. That is through Identifix. And one additional thing that I want to say, and this is just from a theory of high pressure going to low pressure, if it was like the water pump, the cooling system should essentially in a way work because of how high pressure and low pressure work, I'd imagine. I mean, this is not like 100% conclusive, but if the water pump wasn't as efficient, the pressure still would build up on the high side, and because it's low pressure on the opposite side, cooler water, the thermostat should still open up and move efficiently. But it's just getting congested at that thermostat there, and it's still cool on the other side. So again, the thermostat's not open. Now, another possibility that it could be, I could have unusable air inside the cooling system. I don't think that we have a blown head gasket, and I don't think we have a bad thermostat. I don't think we have a bad water pump. I just simply think we have a bad thermostat, and I don't think the radiator is effective either. So if the guy wants to replace it, I just got to hear back from him. Then we'll go through and replace this. If not, we'll go from there, and I'll just have to conclude the video. But I'm going to wait till I hear back from him and go from there. And I know it'll probably be a wise idea to do a pressure test, like a gas test for this engine. But being that, again, it doesn't overheat immediately, and it wasn't boiling when I pulled the top off and just started the engine up, I don't think it's going to be a bad head gasket, just from experience. Because head gaskets typically are going to expose themselves at its most vulnerable state, which is on a heat saturated engine. This didn't do it. This didn't do it at all. But I don't think there's any other testing I could do. I mean, I put a thermometer to it, but I mean, my hands are way better. The thermometer could be out of calibration. I know what hot feels like, you know, I know what cool feels like. So I think I'm gonna let my fingertips, the old mechanical biological thermometer, I'm not gonna let that outdo. I guess I'm not gonna let the electrical component outdo what I can naturally experience. Alrighty. So we got the okay to go ahead and repair the thermostat and the upper radiator hose. So I'm gonna go get those parts. But before I do, I got to thinking, I'm like, well, what if the coolant temperature sensor is defective? And you know, I still would negate the fact that that is the problem simply because the lower and upper heater hose wasn't the same temperature. So despite those fans being on and it being 100 degrees outside, that bottom hose still should be pretty hot, and it wasn't. And again, I took my digital thermometer, my laser thermometer, and the lower hose wound up being around about, I want to say 190, but the top was about 225. Okay, so I know it sounds a little weird, but how the system should work, it still should be within a good margin with the upper and lower radiator hose. So I don't doubt that the thermostat is the ultimate culprit. Okay, so I know temperatures can become uncalibrated with these temperature sensors. They do fail. However, the same thing can happen with the digital thermometer. I'm just going to go off of experience. Oh gosh, it's hot. And replace that lower radiator hose. And not say the radiator hose, but replace the thermostat and upper hose. So let me go run to the parts store and grab that, and let's get to the repairing. All right, just got back from O'Reilly's. I do have the thermostat and the heater hose, the upper radiator hose we're going to replace. And I guess if you had to, you probably may be able to get to these bolts at the top of the bolts for the thermostat, probably without pulling the air box. Probably, but I'm not going to take that chance. I'm just going to go ahead and remove the air box because it looks like I got more room. This is not going to work. It's an 8mm, and I should be able to screw this off to remove the air filter housing. So once I get this off here, it just looks like it. More than likely, this was going to have to come out anyway. Like, why fight it when you probably might be able to maybe saving a couple minutes. That's out. This, I don't know if this lifts out or not. Oh, it's a computer in there. Maybe I can swing. Should have plenty of room. There we go. Alright, get this out. So now I got plenty of room to get the thermostat out. I don't have to fight with it. I'm not going to take this hose off at the bottom and leave that there because the clamp is in a perfect spot. That way if I start moving it, I don't have to do anything to adjust it. There's two bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom, and that should be a 10mm. I'm going to remove this upper radiator hose. I do have a pan at the bottom that'll collect some of the fluid. I do have fresh fluid too. This hose is extremely soft. Right here at the thermostat, I'm going to take a 10mm and run that off. Two 10s there. Crack that. Still kind of warm. Here's the thermostat. This portion of the thermostat is broken. So I mean, I was correct in my diagnosis as far as thermostat being defective, but I don't. This needs to be pressed on the back, and I'm gonna show you with the new thermostat how it's supposed to look. But this shouldn't be loose. This end portion shouldn't be loose and moving up anywhere. I'm not sure if it impeded any type of the performance of this thermostat, but it's not supposed to do that. So this is part of another problem with the thermostat, this piece being broken. I don't know what this rear section do, if it's supposed to collapse also in certain instances, but I know this portion here where my thumb is supposed to collapse. This valve should open, and the fluid, the heat from the rear, from the engine block, should cause this to collapse. This opens, and then the fluid gets circulated from high pressure to place of low pressure, and then the cool water collapses, expands, and shuts this valve down for the thermostat. So yeah, this thermostat is defective. Now, one other thing I noticed, looked like there was some oil contamination. One, I did notice with the factory thermostats, when they have this rubber, they tend to potentially affect the performance of it, and this can get lodged in the thermostat valve, causing some problems. Okay, but this is just obviously old. This has to be a factory one. It's made in USA. We're getting close. I don't see GM on here or anything. Y'all know I frequently patronize O'Reilly's. This is one of their products. This is the thermostat 4228. This is a Murray product. The OEM temperature for this is 190 degrees. If you notice, the aftermarket one is different. The gasket is stuck in here. Here's the gasket. The aftermarket one does not have the rubber around the part of the housing or the valve like the aftermarket one do. It does have this backing spacer here, whatever this is, this plate, but it's like a one piece. It's not pressed on from what it looks like. So this shouldn't fail in the same fashion as this one did. Alright, this is a Motorrad product, despite it being Murray on the box. When I install this, I'm going to install the thermostat with this little valve at the top, right there, a little bleeder. So what's going to happen, air is going to escape, and it's going to allow the coolant level to rise and get behind the thermostat and fill up or submerge the spring portion here that collapses and expands. Make sure there's no guide or anything in there. Okay. want to replace everything in reverse order. Get this old hose out. It's just got a hose clamp on the side, the radiator. I'm going to unscrew that and replace that, and we'll look at the data. I got my starting mileage here. So, 129,165. So I'm gonna go on my little test course and see what happens. It's been idling for about 20 minutes. Temperature's been steady around 212. That's a lot better than what it was because it was climbing up about 230 or so. So let me take it on my test drive, and then we'll take a look at the temperature and see where it's steady at. Just got back off my test drive. I did wind up resetting the trip, so I wound up going close to 6 miles. Got back and let it sit here and idle for a while. The temperature while driving stayed around 208, and at the most it got up to about 215 right now. Giving a little gas, it dropped down to 210, so it stayed in a reasonable range. On the instrument cluster, it is registering normal, so I'm not going to stress out over it. Just here, sitting here talking, it wound up dropping about a degree or about 2 degrees. So this car's fixed. As far as any type of assessment, I don't think I would have done anything different. This was just more of an experience thing, but hopefully what I mentioned does help correlate some potential causation of problems that you may have. So in regards to this one, well, I went over them early on. I'm not going to sit there and go back over and make this video too much longer than what it needs to be. The replacement wasn't bad. It was very simple. I mean, I can understand why most people probably would just wind up just throwing a thermostat in it. If it's overheating, plug a thermostat in it, see what happens. But at least we know what needs to happen before we can justify throwing a part at it based off of correlated symptoms. So the water pump wasn't making any type of strange noise. The car took a while to overheat. I was able to drive it, so I'm not pushing that the water pump was any part of the problem. Radiator, no, it idled fine, drove fine, only started overheating while it was stationary. Now I've had radiators fail prematurely or because of being stopped up or obstructions, but usually what you will see is somebody put stop leak in there. That's a better indication that you probably are dealing with the stopped up radiator, but that's not 100% true. Not 100% true. There's still tests for that, but what we had going on, lower hose was cooler than the top hose. Now if I touch it, they're both going to be equal temperature. Okay, so if anything happened, I'll definitely update. Again, labor time is 1.4 hours to change the thermostat. I've done it 20 minutes, but I go by the book. If anything happened, I'll definitely update. But hit that link, subscribe to the channel, stay informed, how to register my work. See you next one.